Well, the doctor is in today, and we're talking about a health-related topic now, heat-related illness. Olympic athletes have to watch out for it when they're training, and so do you and I, whether we're working out or not, because outside it is just downright hot. So proper care and prevention can keep that heat-related illnesses, such as heat cramps, heat exhaustion, or heat stroke, from affecting you, as he does every Friday. Dr. Scot Ackerman, one of the First Coast's leading doctors, is joining us to talk a little bit more about all of this. So it is summer. It is. Yep. I was looking at the heat index the other day, and my goodness, it's triple digits. It's hot out there. So, living in the South and having to be exposed to those high temperatures, what is the biggest health concern as a doctor that you see from patients?
It is hot, and this week is hot. The forecast for the next 5 days is high 90s and lots of heat. Lots of heat, lots of humidity, and people like to be outside and be engaged in physical activity. And you put these three things together, heat, humidity, and physical activity, and you get dehydration. And so really dehydration is a major concern this time of year when we're all outside enjoying ourselves. There's symptoms of dehydration, thirst. Yeah. Once you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated somewhat. And so there's mild dehydration, just being thirsty, and it can become very severe, and there could be some very severe illnesses associated with dehydration. So the first signs are thirst, as I said, fatigue, but as things get worse, you can get some extreme thirst, decreased urination as well, where you're not putting out fluids. That's when you know you're really dehydrated. Who's at risk for this? People over the age of 50 are at risk. Young athletes, mainly because young athletes tend to exert themselves a lot more than I would. You
Sure.
would probably.
Yeah.
But young teenagers who are doing football or lacrosse or soccer outside in the heat. Obese people, because they have a lot more body fat, and the body fat acts as an insulator, and they're not able to regulate their heat so well. And also people that aren't used to being outside in the summer, people who aren't used to the heat. So if you're a weekend warrior and you're in your office all week, nice air conditioned, and you go out for the weekend and play some flag football or whatever, those people also are very much at risk for dehydration and potentially for severe dehydration. You need to be careful, because this dehydration, if it gets too severe, can lead to other very serious problems.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of those serious illnesses that can happen as a result of all of this heat.
So early dehydration, again, is thirst. And then when you get a little bit more dehydrated, you get what we call heat exhaustion. And heat exhaustion is exemplified by a heat rash or some cramps in the muscle, or cramps in the abdomen, maybe even some nausea. And the most serious thing to worry about that's beyond heat exhaustion is what we call heat stroke. Now, heat exhaustion means you're very hot and you're sweaty, but heat stroke is you're beyond that. You're so dehydrated you can't even sweat anymore, and you have a stroke.
Yeah, so what are some of the signs that someone is experiencing one of these illnesses?
Well, these illnesses typically happen when it's hot.
Okay.
And when it's oppressively hot, like we are right now. So between July and September is about 2/3 of these heat-related illnesses. So that's where you need to be on alert. The first signs are some red splotches or bumps on your skin, muscle crampiness, as I mentioned earlier, then abdominal crampiness as things get more severe, with some nausea and vomiting perhaps. And when you start getting more dehydrated, you get some swelling in the brain, so you get some confusion. You can have a seizure and lose consciousness. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, if someone is very dehydrated, they can get, and they're sweating profusely, that's heat exhaustion. But when you're so dehydrated that you can't sweat anymore, that's heat stroke, and that's a very, very serious situation.
Yes. So if we're noticing that someone is experiencing something like this, how can we help? What do we do to help?
Call 911.
Yeah.
First of all, if someone isn't sweating anymore and they've passed out. When they're not sweating, it means that the body's cooling mechanism isn't working at all. And this is where it can lead to very serious damage to internal organs, such as the brain. You get swelling around the brain, the lungs, swelling around the lungs, what we call pulmonary edema. Someone can go into cardiogenic shock because of not enough fluids, meaning the heart isn't able to pump enough. And also, if you're not putting out enough fluids, you can go into renal failure. And these things can lead to death if they're not treated properly and promptly. So what you want to do is take someone out of the heat. You want to move them indoors, move them out of the sun, the shade, preferably indoors if you can. Remove tight clothing or excessive clothing, because the clothing kind of binds you a bit. You want the blood flow, what blood flow you have, to go to the skin because that's how our cooling mechanism works. Place cold towels or ice on the skin to help, because as the fluid dehydrates off your skin, that's what cools you off. So cool towels or ice will also help. And fluids, finally fluids, you want to replace those fluids any way you can.
Yeah, we have about a minute left, and I know there are a lot of parents who are probably out there watching, and they're thinking about their kids who are out in the heat and the sun, and they're very concerned. How can we prevent kids from, or for parents looking at them out there in football practice and whatnot, how can they prevent them from getting overheated?
Right, I'm glad you brought that up, because teenagers represent about 35% of the emergency room visits of people with dehydration. So you want to prevent it by staying ahead of the dehydration. Drink water before you go play sports. Drink sports drinks, Powerade and the Gatorade, those sort of things. Not only replenish your fluids, but also replenish your minerals and salts. Wear loose-fitting clothing so you can air out properly, and clothing is good because it blocks the sun too and allows you to cool off properly. Sunscreen, and also acclimate to the climate. Don't go right out from the house and start playing hard. Get used to the heat.
All right, Dr. Ackerman, thank you so much for being here as
Casey.
always, for your insight and for sponsoring this segment. Dr. Ackerman is with us every Friday, but we will be taking a break for the next 2 weeks because the Olympics will be on TV, so we'll see you again on August 17th. So thanks again for being here, and for questions regarding today's topic or any other health questions you may have, you can visit firstcoastoncology.com and confidentially submit your questions to Ask the Doctor.